Hello, everyone. I'm Andalucia Filtan from the Complutense University of Madrid. Today, I'll be presenting the main findings of my research on the persistence of monolingual bias in English-Spanish bilingual education programs in Spain. The paper questions the assumption that bilingual education is always inclusive and instead shows how current policies and practices often reinforce native speaker ideals. This is the structure of my presentation. So we will go into a brief introduction followed by the theoretical framework. Then I will briefly present the methodology, the analysis and key findings, and the discussion with a focus on the impact on learners, some suggestions for change, and finally, the conclusions. Although bilingual programs aim to promote linguistic diversity, many still place English, and particularly native-like English, at the center. This often comes at the expense of students' first languages, or even Spanish, especially for learners from immigrant or multilingual backgrounds. The result is a form of bilingualism that still operates within a monolingual English dominant logic. The research is grounded in critical applied linguistics, which challenges the traditional power structures in language teaching, including who gets to be considered a legitimate speaker. It also draws on sociolinguistic perspectives that recognize multilingualism, not monolingualism, as the default state for many learners and questions the dominance of native speakerism in ELT, English language teaching, policies and practices. Regarding the methodology, the study uses a qualitative interpretative approach. We examined three core areas: educational policies, language assessment tools, and classroom practices. For which we selected three representative and recent sources from Spanish bilingual education, ensuring a balanced overview of institutional, evaluative, and pedagogical perspectives. For the policy documents, we have chosen one from Madrid, one from Andalusia, and one from Cantabria. Regarding the assessment tools, we have looked at Cambridge qualifications, Trinity GC, and Aptis ESOL, which are used by bilingual programs in Spain. And for classroom practices, we have delved into three recent Spanish studies. Now for the analysis and key findings. So policy documents tend to prioritize English, often assuming Spanish is already fully mastered and overlooking linguistic diversity. Assessment tools, even when CEFR aligned, promote native-like accuracy and cultural content. And in the classroom, even though teachers show some awareness of multilingual practices, strategies such as translanguaging are inconsistently applied or under-recognized, partly due to lack of training. Now, the impact of monolingual bias is both personal and academic. On the one hand, students experience a loss of confidence and legitimacy. Many feel like they don't own English unless they sound native, which weakens their identity as bilinguals. On the other hand, these ideologies create demotivation, insecurity, and a sense of inadequacy, especially when standardized assessments reinforce narrow definitions of success. Ultimately, both identity and educational growth are undermined. Some suggestions for change. To move forward, bilingual programs must break away from native speaker norms. This means adopting flexible approaches like translanguaging and updating curricula to reflect students' actual linguistic realities. But that alone isn't enough. English must be redefined as a pluricentric language, and teacher training and policy must support a more inclusive ELT model that legitimizes bilingual learners. Finally, Monolingual bias continues to shape how bilingual education operates, often privileging English in narrow, native-like forms. Assessments reinforce these ideologies, and classroom practices lag behind inclusive pedagogical goals. Now, for future studies, they should compare how all autonomous communities approach bilingualism and include real classroom observations to develop more locally responsive and equitable language education. These are my references, of course, a selection of them, and I would like to thank you so much for your attention.